This is Dr. Rebecca Johansson, running and triathlon coach with the Performance Project. Today's sports science mini lecture is on specificity. All right, so this is just a very basic graph. On the y-axis, we have specificity, and on the x-axis, that's weeks before your race. So as you move from left to right, you're getting closer to race day. So as you approach closer to race day, you want your specificity to increase as you get closer to race day. So what are the variables that we're talking about when we say specificity? So that's going to be number one, terrain. So if you're training for, let's say, a very flat and fast road marathon, as you get closer to race day, your long runs you're going to want to do on a flat route. So when you first start, when you're going through your base phase and transition phase in training, it's okay and encouraged to mix up your long run routes and do some hilly training. But then when you approach your peak phase of training, you're going to want those long runs to match the terrain that the race is going to be on. Another variable to consider in terms of specificity is speed. So think about what your race pace is going to be. So oftentimes, no matter what distance race people are preparing for, they think that the speed of their runs needs to increase. But it all depends on what your race pace is going to be. So if you're training for a 100-mile trail ultramarathon race, your race pace is not going to be fast. So as you get closer to race day, most of your runs should be on trail terrain that's going to match race day, and it should be long, slow days out. Your intensity is actually going to decrease, and that's because your A race is a very long race where the pace is going to be slow. So think about it that way. What is your race pace going to be? And as you get closer to race day, you want speed to match race pace. And third, another variable to consider is the distance of the long run, and that's specifically for endurance events. If you're preparing for a 5K or a 10K road race as your A race, you might do some longer runs in base training, like 25K runs. And then obviously those will fall away as you get closer to race day. But a lot of athletes are preparing for marathon distance or ultramarathon distance, and in that case, the closer you get to race day, your weekend long runs, or whichever day of the week you happen to do your longest runs, that distance is going to increase until you get, depending on the race distance that you're preparing for, your longest run will be anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks out before race day. And a question that often comes up is, well, why not have high specificity for the duration of the training program? If I'm training for a 100-mile trail ultramarathon, shouldn't I just do long, slow days out on the mountain all the time? If that's really what makes you happy, that's going to be first and foremost. But in terms of why specificity increases as we get closer to race day is because any athlete can only hold a peak in terms of fitness and preparing for an A race. You can only hold that peak for a few weeks. So if your specificity is really high, you're doing, let's say you're training for a trail ultramarathon, you're doing really intense terrain all the time, you're at risk of not peaking at the right time. So that's why we increase specificity as we get closer to race day. And it's all about peaking at the right time, and that's part of periodization, which we'll have a separate mini lecture on.